Welcome. Happy Sunday evening. I said I was going to make this video today, and I actually have tried to make it 3 times, and whether it be kids running around or just the craziness of the day, but I wanted to make sure to do what I said. So this video, the topic today is vulnerability, and kind of talking around what does that mean. So to be vulnerable, or to have vulnerability, it means that you're exposing something about yourself, about a thought, that has a possibility of hurting you, or, exposing a part of yourself that could be exploited. This is incredibly tough to do to begin with. It can be even more tough to do with anxiety. It can be even more of a consideration if you are someone who has been vulnerable in the past and, had somebody take advantage of that. It can make it harder and harder to be vulnerable. But it is absolutely essential to be able to build trust and connection. And when we consider, people who are vulnerable with us, we have to really take care of that. We have to be careful with the trust that they show us when they give us an opportunity by letting down their defenses. This, chance for building trust and connection, this is rooted in authenticity. This is somebody being true to themselves and coming forward with that. And it is important to treat that with the utmost care, both in our personal lives and in workplaces, because there's very real risk involved. I mean, there's an emotional risk versus how we see ourselves versus the relationships. Going back to the agency conversation of the other day, if you think about it, if the person doesn't have agency, being vulnerable is even more of a difficulty, right? So I think for me, I think this is an important thing to consider, because it can be a really beautiful thing when we have vulnerability and the ability to be vulnerable. And when we ourselves are vulnerable, what it teaches other people around us about what they can do. And I'd like to actually share 2 examples of this in different positions. So the first example is one of my employees, and for different reasons, I'm going to keep this as generic as possible because I think it's important. For different reasons, they were feeling maybe not as valued as I would hope that they would. Now, when you're in that position, usually as an employee, what you might do is, write up your resignation letter and start looking for a job. And much like when clients leave, you would hope that someone would come to you and tell you that they're not happy or that something is going on, but there is risk in that, right? If we're on the employee side, if they don't have the power, they might be worried about retribution. They might be worried if they say that they're looking at moving on, that they're going to get fired anyway, or they'll be the first on the chopping block. And it's not an easy thing to suggest, but it is something that I am going to suggest, is that if you can build a workplace where there is vulnerability, then those employees might actually come to you and let you know how they're feeling. I mean, it is an incredibly powerful thing what happened on our end. He went to his manager, let his manager know how he was feeling, and that manager, tried to reassure and validate him, but then passed that up the chain as well, and gave that information to me. And in doing so, it gave me the opportunity to let them know. Maybe I had been, more involved. Maybe the opportunity hadn't presented itself. And I hadn't had a chance to reaffirm just how much this employee meant to me, and how we value them. So this gave us an opportunity to communicate that. And in the end, something really beautiful happened. So this is mine, but apparently this employee made them for a good portion of the people at the office. I think maybe everybody, but I don't want to say everybody just in case it wasn't. But this was waiting for me after I got back from a conference. It is a thank you card with a little Starbucks gift card so I can get a drink for myself. But it has a beautiful note, which means more to me than the actual words or the value of the gift card. It says, Amanda, thank you for all you do, not only for me, but for the company and the MSP world. You're one of the most important, powerful, and influential women I know. Now, if you think that I love that because, it feeds my ego, no, it's not really how I'm built. What I really love about this is that this is this employee's heart on their sleeve. They gave this to me in a card, and this was not to suck up. This was not to gain anything. This was purely a return of that vulnerability that I originally showed them, and to let me know in one way or another that they feel valued. And if you're thinking about how teams are built, this is an incredibly powerful thing. When we show that we can be vulnerable, when we lead with our feelings, when we lead with emotions in a healthy way, you might be surprised how people will then show up and how that creates this openness. And then, on my other example, I don't have like a lovely thing to show you. It's just a story of how I was in a meeting recently with someone who had agency over me, or at least perceived agency over me. And they could tell, that I was really struggling with an issue. And they made a point to reach out to me and call me the next day and make me feel seen and heard and valued. And for me, that was incredibly powerful. And when we talked before about agency, the piece that really is important is that if you have agency, using vulnerability and paying attention to when other people are being vulnerable and respecting it, that's incredibly powerful. I mean, this is true in our personal lives too. We always have, situations where there might be, a friendship where someone cares more than the other person. If you are the person who knows that, maybe, showing respect and understanding, the role that you play in that person's life. I think all of these things, are incredibly important, because to acknowledge that being vulnerable is to make yourself weak in some way. It's to make yourself weak to bring yourself alongside somebody. You have to understand the inherent risk of rejection in that, and what somebody is doing when they do that, and how much trust they place in your hands when they do so. And I think, considering it from what it could cost them in order to speak, it helps you approach it with the right delicacy and care, because a lot of damage can be done in trust if you don't handle vulnerability carefully. And if you are a leader trying to establish trust in your team, being vulnerable about the things that you need to work on and or tackle is incredibly important. Listening when somebody gives you information can help direct you. And it isn't always the case where we must be the strongest person and fearless leaders. I think sometimes when we look around at our teams, or when we look around in life and say, hey, I'm struggling, somebody might say, me too, but then you're not alone. And there is something about not being alone that is incredibly beautiful. I would suggest if this is something where you have been burned in the past, maybe start small, try little things, share your mood, share something that you like. Find easy ways in order to be vulnerable so that you can build up that trust with people, and encourage others to do the same. And when they trust you to do so, treat it with the utmost care. Hope you've had a wonderful weekend.